Welcome to the Millionaire Race podcast, where we are empowering you to better your financial standing in order to maximize your potential and collectively solve many of the socio-economic problems that face the African American demographic today. My name is Toxio Gunyemi, your host for this podcast, and I'm really happy to have you with us today. As always, if you've asked how you can help this podcast, well, first make sure you're subscribed so that you can be alerted every time a new episode is uploaded. Plus, the more subscribers we have, the easier to get the show promoted. Secondly, please share the podcast with other people that you know. The Millionaire Race is indeed an individual race, but collectively, once we all run this race and finish the race, it benefits us all collectively. And so please share this with as many people as you know so we can get more people on board and get the momentum going. We've got another great show for you today. We have an awesome guest whose story is going to really inspire you. But first, I have a question for you. What is your net worth? Aha! We talked about that last week. Knowing what your net worth is. No, you don't have to tell me or anybody, but you need to know what it is because that is your starting point for this race. It's important to know where you are. We talked about how to do that and other things last week, so hopefully you do know that. I'll be asking you this question as many times as possible throughout the different shows that we have because you must always know what your net worth is. It's if we want to use a financial term, say it's a key performance indicator of how you're doing on this race. In addition, have you been able to put together a budget? Just a simple one. Hopefully you can. These are some of the things that are going to help us with running this race as we learn more. And as you hear from a lot of these other speakers, you see that these are things that they have done as well. So we want to begin to make this a habit of knowing what our net worth is. Knowing where our money is going by just jotting and writing down and just paying attention to where all our finances are. Now, we don't have enough time to go in depth into all these things, so we're putting together some resources for you. But in the meantime, hopefully you can start, doing these things, making sure your credit is good and start working on that while we learn how to get better employment, better jobs, better paying jobs, and investing and things like that. So I'll be asking you these questions continually. That needs to be something that's common, to us, something that's basic. Knowing what your net worth is, having a, simple budget, understanding where our finances are going, making sure our credit is good. Those need to become second nature to us in order to run and win this race. The millionaire race isn't new. In fact, you've been running this race all along. All we're simply doing is defining the race. We're simply defining the race by putting a number to it and guiding us as to how to attain that number, how to attain and achieve that goal. So your net worth lets you understand where you are currently. And the goal that we set, which in this case is a net worth of $1 million, lets you know where you are on that journey and where you need to get to now. Certainly $1 million is not where we need to stop, but it's a great place to aim for. And hopefully if we hit that, then we can move on to even greater heights and greater numbers. And while that is happening, because it's not all just about money, but while that is happening, you would have been able to avail yourself of all the opportunities that are out there, whether it's education-wise, school-wise, helping others, helping yourself, helping your family members. Money will not be, or money should not be, something that limits the opportunities that come your way. And that's the whole reason for the millionaire race. Another notion I'd like to dispel is that it's hard or impossible to attain a net worth of $1 million. It's not. It just depends on how you think about it. Usually when you hear $1 million, you think of the ultra wealthy and how they spend money and things like that. Well, when we're talking about a net worth of $1 million, we can attain that with several strategies of what they do. But the simple one, or the two simple strategies that I've mentioned in nearly every single podcast, and I'll continue to mention it, is just growing your asset base in your home by owning a home, and also investing a little bit in the stock market, mutual funds, through your 401k and things like that. Now, I'll give the example again. If you buy a $300,000 or $400,000 house and you get a 30-year mortgage on it, and you pay that mortgage off in 30 years, historically, the value of your house, of your home, would have at least doubled. Those are the historic prices of real estate here in the United States. And so you would automatically, in 30 years, have a net worth of about $600,000 to $800,000 or more. If simultaneously you are investing your funds or investing some money at the historical rate of approximately 10%, let's say you're investing $200 a month, that in 30 years will be well over $400,000. You'll have that net worth. What makes this option that I mentioned a little difficult for people to accept sometimes is the amount of time it takes. Yes, it's not a sprint if you're going this way. It's a marathon, right? It's a marathon. It's a race that takes a little bit of time, but we shouldn't be in a hurry. This is the race that some of us have to run that way. Now, some can get there much faster. And honestly speaking, if you do put these principles in motion, you will complete the race in less than 30 years. But let's even say you didn't. That's one way to attain this. Now, when it comes to buying a house, you want to buy a house the right way. We'll talk more about that. Making sure your credit is good so you get the best rates so that you pay the least amount of money in order to borrow that money to buy the house. When it comes to investing, now most of us, if you're working, you have a 401k at your job. That's one of the best ways to invest, because not only are you investing your funds, but your company matches some of the money that you invest, which is immediate profit. If you have a 401k at work, definitely I encourage you to start investing some money into your 401k plan. That also we'll talk more about more in detail when we get a chance, because there's so many things to talk about and so many people to interview. But I do want to make sure that as we listen to these podcasts and as we listen to these people, I want you to understand that you can attain and achieve pretty much everything that you are hearing from them. The millionaire race is in your reach, in your grasp. You can get there. You can get there. The person next to you can get there. Again, this is for all of us. And when we do, as we get there, things will be better for all of us. We'll be able to help and change the experience of the African American in the United States. All right. I'm not going to take much more of our time because we have a very important interview to get to. So when we get back, we'll be listening to the great interview that I had with Bobby. I have my good friend Bobby here with me, and you're going to hear an amazing testimony, example of all the stuff that we've been talking about. Bobby, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you. It's my pleasure to be here, man.
Awesome. So Bobby, could you start by just telling us a little bit about yourself?
Oh, sure. Married to my beautiful wife, Victoria, for 22 years this month. We have 3 daughters. They're all grown. They are all married, out of the house, graduated college. Actually have 2 grandchildren, 2 granddaughters now as well. Yeah, and so I've been in business for 30 years. Owned my company for 30 years. That's the high level, I guess, of where I am.
All right. Well, we've spoken many times, and I know there's a lot that people are going to hear from you, that they're going to learn from. If you want, just tell us a little bit about your history, your early childhood, growing up. Were you from a rich family? I mean, what was it like growing up?
No, man. At times I wished I was from a rich family, but I actually grew up as a military brat, Army brat. My father was in the Army. So we moved around. At that time, they would move us around every 3 years. We stayed in Kentucky for the longest period of my life, which was 6 years. So between going into the 6th grade through going into my junior year, we were there. And then we moved down here to Atlanta in my junior year of high school. And so because of all the moving around, once I graduated high school, we were tired. Myself and my sisters, nobody wanted to move anymore. So we all put our roots down here in Atlanta, which has been a great thing. And that I even started college here in Atlanta, didn't finish college, dropped out of college after 3 years, got a job that I thought would give me a good future. And it actually had the potential to provide me a great future. And that's the only reason why I went to college. I didn't have like this purpose or calling or desire even, back in my day, we were raised to, well, you get a good education so you could get a good job, right? And so then you can have a good life. That was kind of the pattern and what all I knew. And so when I started working actually for UPS at part-time while I was in college, and when I first talked to one of my managers, and he said, Bobby, I can't believe how much money I make working for this company. I'm the lowest paid manager in the building, and I make, 100,000 plus. And this was back in the 80s. And he said, I thought I would just be a gym teacher at a high school. I was a jock in high school, went to college, played baseball, and then, got on with UPS. And so I saw that and I said, well, this is why I'm going to college, so I can make good money, get with a good company, right? Yeah. And they were, one of the things about that company is that they would promote you on your merit, on your ability, on your hard work. And so I looked at that as very desirable, said, well, I don't need to graduate. So I dropped out of college and started my career there and realized that I was really called into business. That was kind of my passion, but I didn't know what and how, and that kind of rolled over into, and I may be going into a little more, but it's my story, how I got to where I am. At that time, I was a musician in my younger 20s, played drums, but I played for a community choir. Okay. And there was an event that changed my life. We went just to serve at a men's detention center, a prison, incarcerated men. And we were doing their Sunday service. I was sitting there, and at the time, at this particular facility, they made all the men shave, they were clean shaven, groomed. And I was sitting there looking out at the audience, and I said, this is crazy. This could be any corporate setting in America, but yet we're in a prison. And there's where God laid on my heart. So how can you help? What can you do? And I thought I want to help men in this particular situation when they come out, to give them an opportunity to provide for themselves and their household. And that led me to thinking business.
All right. Wow. You've spoken for just a few minutes and there's already so much to unpack. So that's awesome. So you went to college. Mm-hmm. You were at college for about 3 years.
Right.
So you'd almost finished.
Burnt out.
Okay. So you'd almost finished, but you were also working at the time.
Yes.
Working at UPS. And someone came to you and gave you some insight into what managers make and what the possibilities were for where you were working. So someone came to you. Did you seek them out, or how did that conversation even come up?
I think I may have been in their office and looked at a degree on their wall.
Okay.
And asked them about the degree.
Okay.
And that's how the conversation started.
Okay.
And so he was, willing to share kind of a little bit about his journey.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. So then you started working at UPS full time.
I was actually part-time for the first almost 3 years.
Okay.
And so I was working at UPS part-time after I left college, like that last summer, I guess, in leaving college. I got a full-time job during the day. So I was kind of, working in a warehouse and UPS in the evenings.
Okay.
Yeah, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. All right. And so it was during that period that you went to the prison.
Right.
And you felt called into business.
Yes. Basically just saw a need. Okay. Right. And I kind of asked God, how do I, what can I do to help? And, and so I had this idea, a business idea at the time, and it was called Chauffeur for Hire.
Okay.
And again, this was back in the early 80s, right? Or mid 80s at this point, maybe around 85-ish, 87, something around there.
Yeah.
But what was going on big in kind of in society was Mothers Against Drunk Drivers organization, MAD. And it was a really big public service push against drunk driving and that kind of thing. And so I said, well, chauffeur for hire. This is the idea. It's somewhere in between a limousine and a taxi. Now we have Uber. So
I was about to say.
Right. But at this time, it was somewhere between a limousine and a taxi. And the idea was that individuals wanting to go out and they knew they would be drinking, they would hire a driver to drive their personal vehicle. So now they don't have to worry about, what do I do with my car? I'm not going to leave it at the bar or wherever, whatever, right? I've got a driver for the night. And so that, they would hire a driver to do that for them. And that was the idea.
Man, you were ahead of your time, because if there was the internet and the social media that we have available now, which is what makes companies like Uber viable,
sure,
you would have been able to do that then.
Oh yeah. Technology certainly would have helped with that whole idea. But the funny thing, I'll just share kind of where I rode into business with this was that as I was trying to figure out, well, how do I meet people, with the means to do something like this? And I'd never been in this environment, but I remember driving and I saw in Atlanta a guy valet parking cars. And I said, I can maybe that would be a good place to meet my potential clients, people who are at an establishment that can. Now, I didn't come from that world. I had never valet parked in my life or been in a vehicle that was valet parked, or I very rarely even had been to a full service restaurant. I didn't grow up in that world. Like my parents we didn't live that way. So I did. I went to the guy and said, hey, y'all hiring or what's going on here? Ended up meeting the owner of the valet parking company. And he said, hey, I have an account. He said, no, you could come help us at this event. We're doing a grand opening of all places at a strip club. And I was like, oh my goodness. But I was in the parking lot, so I didn't, didn't have to deal with it, but it was all the stereotypical things that I saw on TV about a strip club was walking through, and I was like, they really live this way. This is crazy. But so at any rate, I worked with him. He saw I was a hard worker, and he kind of, said, after I finished with that gig, he said, hey, I've got this place, a contract up at a country club. And you can, go up there and work. And I was like, yeah, I'll take it, because, that's who I wanted to reach, were those people. That's where I started out. doing it. Had my little chauffeur for hire cards when I worked, out on the table. So while they were waiting on their cars, they would pick it up and they'd come like, Bobby, what is this about? And I would share with them what I was trying to do. And that was where I began my foray into business, even though I never got one client for chauffeur for hire. it never materialized.
But it was a start. So, yeah. Okay, there's some things I have to pick out here, and hopefully you can expatiate on for us.
Okay.
I had mentioned, and I noted the fact that at UPS, you were the one that initiated the conversation that led to the knowledge of what you could potentially do at UPS. You initiated that. What in your background do you think helped you to have that idea of business and entrepreneurship? What was there anything in particular or anyone in particular?
I'll tell you, no. There was nothing that would have pegged me for business. I believe there's certain gifts and callings that we all have. That's like asking an artist, what in your background made you want to draw? Like, no, I just always drew. What made you want to sing? I just always sang. Business was just something that it just piqued my interest at a very early age. I can say this. I remember one summer, I had an uncle that had a printing business in Alabama. And that summer I went and stayed with them, and I went to work with him. They were like, yeah, come to work with me. And I swept the floors, and he showed me a little bit about what he did. And I remember him saying, this is why math is important, because you have to take this board and you divide it by, the dimensions and you get the spacing of your letters. And he was like, so study your math because you're going to use math in everything. He did tell me that. Okay. And that made an impression on me. But I think the idea of seeing him run that business and people coming in and out, that's what intrigued me. And I always had an interest, even though I didn't have a means or vehicle to be exposed in any level to business. I just had that interest. And so I had business ideas, and I went to college because I didn't have much direction. I went to college for engineering. If I had some good direction, I should have went to college for business, because my favorite class at that engineering school was a business communication class. And that further kind of enhanced that idea that I really like business, but I didn't have the exposure.
All right. So again, you initiated getting in touch with the valet service that you saw, and then you got in with them and started working with them. Then what happened next?
Something happened with the owner of that valet parking company. I was diligent in always being at that country club for my shift. And he only had the account for weekends. So it was Friday night, Saturday. And because I had an ulterior motive, I wanted to meet the members. I was like, I'll do it Friday and Saturday. So after I got worked all week at UPS, Friday night, I went there, and it didn't hurt, having extra money. I was had a young family, and so having some extra money on hand never was a bad thing as well. But the manager of the country club said, hey, we can't get in touch with, your boss. Have you heard from him? I was like, no, we don't communicate. I just show up and work. And after a couple of weeks of that, he came to me and said, we're going to have to find a new service. Do you want this account? Well, I already had Chauffeur for Hire Incorporated set up. So my first invoice from the country club was to Chauffeur for Hire. And so I, already had a business set up because I was trying to start. So it was an easy transition. I think I may have had to get some minimal amount of insurance coverage at that time. And that was my foray into owning a valet parking business. And I specialized in country clubs. Then we moved into a few high-end restaurants, and we did a lot of private parties, because we had these tie-ins with the members.
Yeah.
When they had a private event, they would say, hey, can we hire a few of your guys? And so I did that for, over 12, 15 years.
It grew pretty large.
It wasn't large, but it was a nice small business. But goes back to the purpose, right? Helping guys.
Yeah.
Right. And I was able to bring in a lot of young men and expose them to an environment that, I knew I had never been a part of and never been kind of intimately involved with, and gave them an opportunity to do what I was doing, make some money for your family, take care of your household, put a little extra income on top of your full-time job.
So is that the industry you're still in?
That is not. I am currently in the multifamily industry, the apartment industry. I own a service company that services apartments. We do trash service for apartments. Again, let me kind of walk you through how that worked out. I was doing the valet parking. A member one day said to me, you got our cars up here, man. You should clean the cars while we get them parked for the next year. And I was like, he may have something there, and end up opening up detail, on-site auto detailing at the country club. Again, it went back to my purpose, because with the valet parking, I could only help a certain segment of individuals. Because of our client base, they couldn't be too rough around the edge. Because of what we were doing, parking cars, you couldn't be too tall, too short, too heavy, too slow. It was a very, to be effective, you had to be kind of within this little parameter, this range of body type. Not to mention, you have to be able to interact directly with these individuals to be successful. So I was found myself limited. And so when the auto detailing opportunity kind of presented itself, I was like, hey, I can help more guys because it's not as much interaction. And that's what we did. But the problem with scaling a detailing business was that once someone became proficient, they would want to go out and do their own thing. And so I was limited on that. So I ended up selling out of the detail business. But as I left UPS in 2001. So I did 15 years at UPS while I was doing these other business ventures because they were part-time. But in 2001, I really felt called to step away from UPS and go full-time with the valet parking and with the auto detailing business. I started that, and within the first couple of months of being fully self-employed, I had this idea to do the trash business. And when I went to my wife to explain to her that I had another business idea, the way I was able to sell it to her was that I have this idea, but it still is in line with my purpose to help young men. And I can help more young men because it doesn't have the training limitations of detailing, and it doesn't have the physical limitations of the valet parking. And it's a wider and a bigger opportunity if it can take off. And at this time, back in 2001, this was an industry. It wasn't an industry yet. I was one of the first, and certainly one of the first in Georgia. There was one other guy in Georgia who was trying to get off the ground at the same time. And there was a guy in Florida who was doing it pretty successfully. And I believe he was kind of the founder of this whole, what they now call valet trash industry. Now, most people under 35 have some experience with valet trash because their first apartment probably had it, or they had a friend that lived in apartments that had it. But when I talk to folks over, my age, they're like, dude, what? Like, what is that? I never said. But now people my age go, yeah, my son or my daughter lives in an apartment that has it, So it's widely known now.
That's awesome. You make it sound so easy. Now, I'm sure it's not so easy. We can hear very clearly where your heart is, your heart to help people. And that has guided you in a lot of what you've done. Were there any obstacles that you faced as an African American in getting these businesses off the ground and in running them successfully as you have?
Specifically as an African American, I would say more so in the current industry I'm in now than prior. And I say that because in the prior two ventures, I could go and directly speak with usually a general manager of a facility. And they understood that this is the guy who's going to be providing our service. for the most part. And so they could see who they were dealing with, and it didn't really matter that I owned the business, because in their minds, it was just a service that I was bringing to their facility. So it didn't have as big as an effect in that environment. But moving into this industry, in the multifamily industry, I've never been one to let anyone know that I own the business. I never put owner or founder or any of that type of verbiage on a business card or any and here's what I've learned in that. People first and foremost want someone who's going to be effective and competent in what they're doing. So I have to just prove my effectiveness and competency in this area. I don't need you to know that I own the business. All I need you to know is that if you have a problem and you call me, I'm going to be the one and I'm going to take care of it, regardless if you think I'm a manager or a service provider. All they need to know is that I can call Bobby and this gets taken care of. As I gained legs in this industry and it started to be known that I owned the company, that's when I found challenges. Make no mistakes about it. Business is the one arena where there's so much racism in the whole arena of business. And what I mean by that and how I kind of back that up is this. There's certain contracts that people aren't comfortable giving to a person of color. The way it gets wrapped up to not being racism, they call it relationships. And so they're like, well, this person can go over here and have this relationship, and it's makes for successful sales and successful business, where another person, same talents, abilities, background, he's not able to have that relationship. And so it becomes a challenge for especially people of color. That's why, the government creates these minority business programs, because they're like, they know you're not going to get the opportunity to build certain relationships, even though you're maybe as talented to do it. So I that's my opinion, but it also has been my experience. And so the way I combat that is that I have to be, I came up in an era where you had to be twice as good. That's my mantra, is that I just have to be twice as good. I can't do certain things that my competitors do. I can't afford to make some of the mistakes they make, and I can't afford to display some of the behaviors they display, because it's not an even playing field. And I think as African Americans, especially for our younger generation, where we hear this talk about a sense of entitlement, and I think a lot of our younger generation, it's a sense of entitlement, but it's almost rightly so, because they feel, I think they feel like I'm a human just like you. And so I deserve to have a level playing field. I have the right to have an opportunity for whatever it is they're trying to do, which they are right about that. That's not a wrong position. But the realistic position to have is that you have to be twice as good, because you're not going to have the same opportunity in all cases. And that's just the fact. So, you as a business owner, you can't afford to be sloppy in some of your execution. You have to be twice as good if you're trying to compete for the same opportunities that your competitors of a different race have.
Thank you for sharing that. Is this partly because when you go to these places to look for business, the owners of those businesses are primarily other races?
Not just the owners, but the decision makers. And in my space, up until I would say I've been in this space for 20 years now, 21 years. The first 15 to maybe even 16 years, but certainly the first 15 years, I could count on one hand the decision makers that were African American, on one hand out of thousands. that was, and I can go into other stories about that, but that was the, the landscape. Now, there's more on one hand in one organization that can make my decision. So they, a lot has changed in the landscape and the environment as the labor market kind of contracted and got a lot tighter. People were forced to look outside of their circle for talent, and it gave opportunities that wasn't previously there. And that's, what I see now in just about every industry, for young people, because it's so hard to find good people, you're able to get opportunities now that you usually previously wouldn't been afforded. So take advantage of them, of those opportunities. Yeah.
Excellent. So what advice would you give to someone who is listening to this right now and going, Valley Trash Service? That's something that I would like to get into as well. Is that something you would advise?
Well, I don't dissuade anyone from doing anything that they're, but this is my advice to them would be, if you're really interested in this, get a job doing it. Do it for a minimum of 6 months, because, it's not that you don't have the talent or ability to do more than pick up trash, but if you're going to do it, one, you'll learn the business from the inside, you'll get paid doing it, but it's going to make you a better owner, because if you've done it for any length of time, you will then have a clear understanding of what your frontline people are going through because you've done it. So you're going to be a better leader just because of that anyway. So it gives you the opportunity from that standpoint to be better as a leader, even though you may have the money, you may have the connections, you may have a lot of the front end, baseline things to do this business or any business successfully. So that's the first point of advice that I would give, is to actually get into it. We do have a franchise model now with our company, and that's one of the prerequisites to becoming a franchise, is that you've got to successfully go out here and pick up trash for a minimum of 3 months. And I can't tell you how that has worked for us, because I've had people who, from a franchisee standpoint could qualify, but they didn't want to pick up trash. And that's also been one of our biggest failures, is that we've had franchisees come in and they've discovered, I don't want to pick up trash. Well, guess what? That's what we do. We don't do anything but pick up trash. And so if your guys quit on you and you don't want to do the work, what do you have? And so that's one of the first points of advice I would give. I think the second really important piece of advice I would give someone is that, and this applies to going into business in general, is that you have to have a penchant for wanting to learn. If you don't want to learn, if you don't enjoy learning new things, don't get into business as, not in a leadership role, because you have to be willing to learn a lot of things that you're not even interested in, but if you're going to be successful, you have to be willing to learn. So those are the first two things. And if you want the third big one,
oh yes, we do.
The third big one is have a purpose that's bigger than you and your family. If you say, I want to go into business because I want to take better care of my family and I want to leave a legacy for my family, and those are not bad things. But it's not going to be enough to get you through the tough times, because you can leave a legacy for your family and you could take really good care of your family working for somebody else and not having the problems. Because as you know, when you own it and the buck stops with you, that stuff comes home with you. You don't get to clock out, and you don't get to have a vacation for 5 days or 7 days or 9 days or whatever you want to do, and that business not be a concern. You take it on vacation. It's like a baby. You take it on vacation with you. You take it to the grocery store with you. You take it to church with you. It stays with you, and So those are the three things, and the biggest one, obviously, is the last one, have a purpose, but also be willing to learn and be willing to get in it and do it for a season to make sure it's something that you want to make part of your life.
Wonderful. I mean, you have a successful business here. And I'm sure people listening, there are going to be a few people saying, hey, how can I get in touch, with Bobby? I'm interested in the trash valet business as well. I never looked at it the way Bobby has just described it, because when you hear trash, you just think trash, but it's actually a viable business, which he has thrived on. So how would they get in touch with you?
Sure. The first thing, they can take a look at our website, which is first, that's the number 1, valettrash.com. That's the best way to find out a little more about us. And they can also, reach me through that website. Again, if you're looking to get into the business on your own, I'm, happy to talk with you about it, but don't discount what you just heard. Join with the company, do the work, learn it, from the inside, and then, branch out and jump into it if that's what you really feel, called to do.
That's all we have time for today. Please stay tuned for the next episode where you'll hear the conclusion of my interview with Bobby. My name is Toxio Gunyemi. God bless you, and I'll see you next time.